right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Star Wars Talk. Um, so today I really wanted to go into our fears. Our fears are so important, because they they are driving some of the articles about Star Wars that are getting the most hits on the internet right now. And what I'm talking about specifically is there's about 3 articles if you go out and search on the internet, and I do every day for Star Wars news. And they all basically are the same article. And the articles say, what are the chances that The Force Awakens will disappoint? What are the chances that The Force Awakens will suck? We've been down this road before. Don't get too excited. So, there's all kinds of these articles out there right now, by mostly people who are just still seething from the prequels, and they all need to get a life. Honestly, it's one of these things where I realize that there's optimists and pessimists in this world, and so the pessimists are always going to be like, it could still suck. I mean, even when that first teaser came out, there was just so many people out there that were just pissed off about the way that lightsaber looked, how it was impractical, and that's it. This movie is going to be terrible. And despite the hundreds of millions of views, all the people on the internet crying over the trailers, all of the stars in Hollywood who were fans that are just going crazy about this movie, despite all of that, you'll still find the occasional person out there who's like, yeah, it looks like crap. And it's comical at this point. I mean, you can't please everybody. So there's two questions in this, right? And I think they both need to be answered. So the first thing is, and I have a top 5 list for this one. The other one we're just going to talk about. Okay? So the first question is, what are the chances that The Force Awakens will suck? Like the movie will just be awful. Zero. The chances are 0. There is no chance of that. I have a top 5 list. Here, there's 5 very good reasons why this movie will not suck. Okay, it won't suck. And again, that's the question: Will the Force Awakens suck? Be a terrible movie? Okay. So my number 5, and they're not in any particular order of there's just 5 things. I just threw them on the list, so don't even worry about it. So number 5, the original cast signs back on, including Harrison Ford. So anybody who followed Harrison Ford's career knows that Harrison has always been adamant that he was more than happy to hang up Solo. He was done. He wanted that character dead, buried. He literally wanted the character dead in the last movie. He didn't want to play it anymore. So he had to have basically gotten, when he signed on to do this, and JJ said in an interview last night that the original cast, I think it was with Howard Stern yesterday or the day before, he basically came out and said, well, look, they had already signed on by the time I got here, but, so they had already signed on. But I guarantee you, they all had script approval. They all maybe had signed on to do it, but if they hated it, probably could have dropped out. Probably some type of clause in that contract that said they could have walked away if it looked awful. And Harrison Ford, I assure you, would not have just signed on to do it blindly. So that means he had to have read it, he had to have looked at it, and he's mentioned in several interviews that the script that he got was great. So, and that brings us into the next thing, Kasdan. So we got the guy who wrote arguably the number 1 and number 2 fanboy favorite Star Wars films. So, Jedi and Empire. So we've got him, the guy who wrote the movies that we loved so much. I mean, so that right there is huge. That just having that person who knows that story so well that he's there. So I mean, that's one big thing right there. It's going to be set up the way that the other films that we love so much were set up, and it's going to have the same writer, Dialogue's not going to be crappy. It's going to work out there in that aspect of it. Um, the next thing, practical effects. Again, I can't stress this enough. One of the things that really, 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 really hurt the actors was being locked on a freaking sound stage with George Lucas. How awful is that? How absolutely awful to be locked on a soundstage with George Lucas. Can you imagine? I I can't. I can't. I can't. I literally could not imagine that. And it's the reason why we got the performances we got, is because they had literally nobody there to put them to put them into a location to actually help them feel like the characters that they are. So those practical effects, the practical sets, being able to look and touch and feel and be there is going to help the actors give great performances. So that right there is going to be huge. The other thing is you've got a completely different director. This is a director who knows how to direct, smaller emotional films as well as big action films. So he's known for both of those moments. Lucas is not. I mean, honestly, the guy, the two hit films he did were not particularly emotional films. So being able to coax those performances out of people was not something that he was ever really good at. And even if you look at A New Hope, as a director, the things that made A New Hope great, it was not really anybody's acting performance with the exception of Harrison Ford, who was just great. So nobody's acting performance was just phenomenal in that movie. Nobody was winning a Best Actor award. Whereas with J.J. Abrams, he's worked on some really great films with some really great actors. He knows how to get the performances we need out of those actors to make this great. So I think that's going to be a big moment and a big thing for the series, is having J.J. Abrams there. And he is the ultimate fan. So he's far more critical of himself than George Lucas ever was. George Lucas is egomaniacal. The guy, and even now when you read his interviews, and believe me, I hold the guy in the highest esteem as possible, but the reality is he has always felt like he owns Star Wars and he can do whatever he wants with it. And JJ doesn't feel that way. He's the exact opposite. He knows it's Lucas's baby, but he also knows that we all own Star Wars. There's a reason why we made him very rich, George Lucas. So I think knowing that, being one of us, being one of the fans, he's going to be far more critical of himself than he ever than we could be on him. And there's a story recently, where he did Howard Stern again. And if you can, go find the Howard Stern interview and listen to it. It's one of the things that really solidified this list for me. As he talks about screening it for Bob Iger and all of the big execs over there at Disney, and how they had very minimal notes. But he had like a page of notes. Like, he had things that he had found that he thought he needed to completely redo. And just notes for himself. Whereas the Disney execs didn't have that much. And that brings me to my next thing. My final point here on this one. Disney cannot afford for this movie to suck. They marketed it really great, but make no mistake about it. If this movie is crap, if it's a big turd on a plate and they serve it up to us, they know there is little chance in hell that they ever come close to matching what this movie does at the box office. And they need 2 or 3 movies with a performance like this in order to just become cash neutral, in order to just make back their investment into this series. So they cannot afford to bomb right here. So trust me, had this movie sucked, had there been something about this movie that really bothered the people at Disney, that release date would have been pushed back until summer of next year, and they would have brought in people to help make it better. So make no mistake about it. This movie will not suck. It will not be awful. It will be, at the very least, a decent movie. At the very least, probably a great movie. Most of us are already calling it the best movie of all time. And again, that's a very subjective thing. But for Star Wars fan, if they could get some of the things that we've all been wanting and needing for the past 30 years on film, then it may very well be, subjectively, for the Star Wars community, the best Star Wars film of all time. But there is zero chance that the movie sucks. It wouldn't be released if it sucked. And I hear people all the time like, well, Avengers Age of Ultron sucked. No. Avengers Age of Ultron did not suck. Avengers Age of Ultron may have disappointed, but it did not suck. And that brings us into the next question, the next thing. Is it possible that this movie can disappoint? Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, first of all, as Star Wars fans, we all have very different ideas of what we want. And the reality is, the cold, hard reality is, that some of us just want very different things from the, as I just said, some of us want very different things. And some of us like very different aspects about the series. And there's no way that he wrote a movie that is going to universally please every one of the Star Wars fans. It can't happen. It can't happen. There is going to be a group of Star Wars fans that is disappointed by these films. For whatever reason. Maybe it's not dark enough. Maybe it's not light enough. Maybe there's not enough sword fighting or lightsaber fighting. Maybe there's not enough space battles. Maybe there's not enough of Snoke. Maybe there's not enough of this. It's going to be so hard. The expectations of trying to appeal to everyone is ridiculous. So why even bother? Why even try? I don't think he's going to. He's going to make the best film that he could think to make. And the reality is, the cold hard reality is, it's going to be better than the 3 movies that we just got. So there's no point in trying to think that this movie could not possibly disappoint people. It will disappoint some people. There's going to be a large segment of the Star Wars population that is just going to be crying over their Cheerios. So I say this with the utmost respect. We need to stop the pessimism a little bit. There's a lot of optimism about this movie, so I do realize that the overwhelming feeling is that this movie is going to be great. But some of these people are very, like, there are these articles about how it's going to suck. There is no chance that this movie sucks. No chance. For the reasons that I mentioned, I'm not going to recount them all. There is no chance that this movie sucks. But if you disagree with me, if you think there's even a small percentage chance that the movie's going to suck, please leave some comments. Tell me why you think it's going to suck. Tell me what about you've seen thus far makes you think it's going to suck. So that's our talk for today. Please go down into the comments. Please like. Please subscribe. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Take care.